Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third video in the Axis Football Feature Reveal series. In this video, we are going to take a look at franchise mode and the new features that we've added for Axis 2021. Let's get right into it. So if you watched the previous two videos in this series, the first one was on customization and the second one was on modding. You'll see some of the teams that we created already, but we are going to look at franchise mode in this video, and we're going to go ahead and pop in right here. So you have 4 different slots to save franchises. This is not new. That was a feature in previous versions. So we're going to go ahead and create a new one right here. And the first thing that you're going to be presented with is the team select screen. And this is, again, the same as it was before. But you are going to have the option to select any team that has previously been created, either through modding or through the team creator suite. So we will see the Carolina Cyclones that was created in the first video. We also see the 3 teams that are included in the mods. If you are on PC, you do have the ability to add in modded teams. And so we are just going to, we'll click a random team here and we'll go with Orlando. So I'm going to select Orlando here. And this brings us to the league setup options. And the brand new feature, the first one that we're going to take a look at right now, is we have now supported 2 different league configurations. So we have an American League configuration, and we can see over there on the right side with additional information what that means. This is going to be the NFL setup. So if you want 2 conferences with 4 divisions and 4 teams in each, this is what you want. If you want to go with the traditional Axis system for years past with the tier system, that's going to be the tier system option. That's where you have 3 different tiers, 12 teams in each, and there are promotion relegation games at the end where teams move up or move down tiers depending on the results of those games. Okay, the other features that we have here, random rosters. These are from years past as well. You can, if you want to go with the base default rosters, you can leave random rosters off, unlimited funds off. This controls whether or not you can run out of money. And random tier placement, as it says, if you're in the tier system, how teams are placed in those tiers. But we are going to go with the American League setup, showing you guys something new. Again, this is going to be 2 conferences, 4 divisions in each conference, and 4 teams in each. We do have plans in the future to allow for additional setup options, different size conferences, different size divisions, that sort of thing. But we are going with just the standard NFL setup for this year. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And this brings us to our second new feature where you can assign the teams. Now, with the ability to create new teams, we also wanted to give you guys the options to use those teams and use modded teams in your franchise. This is something that wasn't supported in years past, but it is going to be supported this year. So what this screen gives you the option to do is go through and select which teams you want in which conferences and which divisions. So we've got an American Conference and a National Conference, and you can see there's a North, South, East, and West in each of these. So if you want to go through and add some of your modded teams or add some of the user-created teams, you can do so here. If you notice, the team setups are similar to what you might see in another league. But if we wanted to say, let's say we wanted to add that Carolina Cyclones team that we created back in the first video, it's not included in any of these right now. So let's say, excuse me, let's say instead of Cleveland, we wanted to add that team. We would simply click on that, and it shows you the total number of teams available, and then you would just scroll through the list and find that team and click, and it's going to add it right there. So you can add any of the modded teams. And again, we saw the 3 modded teams at the end, as well as the user-created team right there. We saw all of those listed. So this gives you complete control over what teams are in your franchise, what teams are in which conference, division. You can set it up however you want. And this is really big. I mentioned this in the last video. We really value and want to do all that we can to support custom leagues. There's lots of great leagues out there that use Axis Football as their simulation. And so we want to do everything that we can to help that. And in years past, it was difficult to run those leagues through our in-game franchise mode because they didn't have the option to do this. They didn't have the option to use modded teams, and now they do. So hopefully this is a very welcome feature and will make things a lot easier for your league and for you individuals that like to set up things exactly how you want it. Hopefully this is a step in the right direction, giving you guys all of the control to do what it is that you want to do with the game. All right, so I'm going to click Start Franchise. We'll go with the Carolina Cyclones in the American North Division. And we see it set up right here. This is very familiar for those of you that spent some time in franchise mode. Not a ton changed in terms of the layout here. We have some brand new icons for the conferences, the tiers, and the trophies. Those will all be brand new. But I do want to get into the next new feature, which is under the Stats tab right here. So if we pull over here, we'll see there's a Hall of Records. And before we get into the Hall of Records, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to simulate a few games just so we get some numbers to look at. So I'm going to simulate the first 5 games in this season. Then we're going to pop over to Stats and go into Hall of Records. And this is something that has been requested for a while. Career stats, individual records, all that sort of thing. So what we're going to do, is go through each of these different sections and take a look at what is actually being stored here for you guys to look at. The first is going to be franchise records. So we click on franchise records, and again, we see a lot of options up here. So we have Access Bowl championships. If you're using the tier setup, this will be replaced with Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 championships. So this keeps kind of your overview for your franchise, single game yardage records for just your franchise. And then it also shows for your, for the Orlando Rockets, for your team, these are all your team season stats. Okay, so most pass yards, wins and losses, defensive, all that sort of stuff. So it tracks the year and the record. So what this is showing us is the most sacks the Orlando Rockets have ever had in a single season was in 2021, and they've had 8. Well, that's this year because it starts fresh with each new franchise, and so we must have had a total of 8 sacks in the first 5 games. Going over to the next, this is for individual game records, and again, this is just for your franchise, just for the Orlando Rockets. These are single game records, so it tracks the stat on the left side, the year that it occurred, the player, and what the record is. Okay, so this is offensive, defensive, and special teams. And if you look here, you'll notice that one of the other new features that we've added this year is additional stat tracking. So we track things like field goals, punts, kick return yards is another big thing. Also, tackles for loss is something else. And when you look at the touchdowns, if we come over here, we have rush touchdowns, receiving touchdowns, total touchdowns, defensive touchdowns. We've separated touchdowns into different categories. In years past, these were all under one, so it was really difficult to say if a receiver or a running back had 3 touchdowns. Were they rushing? Were they receiving? Or they maybe a kick return? And so we've separated those out. All right, moving on. Again, individual season for the franchise. So this is just for the Orlando Rockets. These are season stats for individual players. And we did add some minimum values for quarterback rating. So if a quarterback comes in as your backup and he plays 3 snaps and he throws 3 complete passes and 1's for a touchdown, he's going to have a really high quarterback rating. So we added minimums for some of these, yards per pass, completion percentage, that sort of thing. And we see right here, if for defensive touchdowns, so in the first 5 games, we must not have gotten a defensive touchdown yet. So that'll show as blank. And again, additional stat tracking, punts inside the 20, touchbacks, yards per punt, kick return touchdowns. We track lots and lots of different stuff. I know that this is important for you franchise guys to get really deep into stats. And then the final tab we have are individual all-time. Okay, so all-time leaders for your franchise. So if you want to go in and say, you've played 10 seasons, you want to say, okay, who has the most rush yards in the history of our franchise, in the history of the Orlando Rockets, who's got the most rush yards, who's got the most tackles for loss, all that sort of stuff. That's what's tracked here. Okay, so we see lots of great stuff. I'm going to back out, and that was franchise. Now let's go into team records. For team records, we've got two different sections. We've got game and season. And what this tracks is this tracks team-based records for an entire game. So if you want to say, in the history of the league, what team had the most pass yards in a single game? And that would be, for this example, Los Angeles, obviously 2021, had 444 pass yards. That's the most any team has had in a single game. If we come over here to season, this is what you would expect. Team-based stats over the course of an entire season. So what team in the history of the league had the most pass yards in an entire season? And so far in the first 5 games, that's going to be Green Bay. And again, you can excuse me, see all of these populate as the season goes. For the pass rush yards allowed and points allowed, these won't get populated until the end of the season for obvious reasons. And the final thing that we have is we have individual records. And individual records, this is going to span the entire league. And so what we have, this kind of mirrors what we saw in the first screen when we were looking at franchise records. But individual records is going to be not just for the specific team that you're controlling, but for the entire league. So if we wanted to say, what is the most pass touchdowns that any player has had in the history of the league in a single game, and that would be Jay Howard. Well, that's actually one of our players. For Orlando, had 5 pass touchdowns in a single game. If we want to look at season records for individuals across the league, we can see that here. So again, looks like Chavez for Chicago has had 15 pass touchdowns in the first 5 games. That is the individual season leader. And again, these will update as we get into future seasons with the year. And all-time leaders, this is individual all-time leaders across the franchise. So lots of great stat tracking, lots of great stuff to look at in terms of all-time leaders, both for individuals, teams, for game and season, franchise, all sort of stuff that you want to look at. That is the Axis Hall of Records. All right, moving on. We've got a few other things that we have added this year. If we go over to front office, go over to personnel and down into depth chart, one of the things that has often been requested is the ability to specify who your kick and punt returner is. So we've got a kick return, or there's a kicker, punter, and right after that we've got kick return and punt return. And you can sub out and now specify these on the depth chart, which is something that you guys have been requesting for a while. So we've added that in the game for you. You now have control over who the kick and punt returners are. And the last thing that I want to show you guys that we have added new this year to franchise mode is over in settings. And this is just a real quick tab. The ability to edit teams, and we really added these in mostly for sim leagues, but also for users that want to adjust things while the season is running. Let me open this up, and what this does is this is going to mirror the Team Creator Suite, but it's only going to populate the list with the teams that are a part of the franchise. Okay, so you can see this is kind of separated by division. You can just cycle through. We've got 4 pages with 8 teams each. That gives us the 32 teams that are participating in this franchise. And what this allows you to do is this allows you to make adjustments to the teams that are just in your franchise. Okay, so without getting into how the data is stored, basically the way it works is when you create a franchise, the teams that are participating in that franchise, the data for those teams basically gets copied into a new save location. And so any changes made to that team, so if you change the roster, you draft new players, it's only going to affect the team as it exists in your franchise. And so if you, for example, create a franchise with Pittsburgh and you go in and you adjust the depth chart for Pittsburgh, and then you back out of franchise and go into a regular exhibition game and use Pittsburgh, the changes that you made to Pittsburgh in your franchise won't be reflected in the normal Pittsburgh team. Or if you start a new franchise, it won't be reflected in that Pittsburgh team. And so what this does is this option gives you the ability to go in and make adjustments just for the teams that participate in your franchise. So if you are running a sim league, and you want, and you're running a sim league and each individual player controls a separate team, and that player wants to adjust, let's say, their play calling strategy, then you can go into that team, go play selection, make adjustments here, and back out, accept it, and it's going to save it for that team. Okay, so as you update your league, these are basically additional options and control for you to continue to run your league through our in-game franchise mode, but still make adjustments to the team. Okay, so if you want to, you can change team names. So if we want to go in and change Baltimore Paladins to something else, it'll adjust their team name. But if we back all the way out and go into play now and then in exhibition, we see that Baltimore is still the Baltimore Paladins, but when we go into franchise mode and we pull up Baltimore, or we go into standings and we look at Baltimore, we see that their name is different here. Okay, so this really gives you the option and the ability to control lots of information about teams that are part of the franchise. I know that we run our own sim league, our esports league through Access Football, and that's what we're going to be doing to adjust teams on a week-by-week basis. Again, we really value what you guys do for the sim leagues. We value the ability to give everyone as much control over playing the game as you want, setting up the teams like you want, so that you can enjoy the game. And all of these are efforts to step in that direction. All right, so that's going to wrap up the third video where we were looking at franchise mode. We do have one video left, and that we will be looking at the gameplay changes, stuff we've made to on-field controls. So thank you again for watching this, and we will be back soon with the last video.